Good evening. Welcome to the February 27th, 2018 Finance Committee meeting. Committee members present this evening, Councilors Walsh, Zarella, Boschman, myself, Councilor Di Natale, and President Kuchmarek. Also present, Councilor Donnelly. We will start with, councilors, we'll move to the very last order on the agenda. First, to 30-18, in order that the City of Fitchburg accepts a deed in lieu of foreclosure for municipal charges and taxes for the real property located at 116 to 118 Day Street. Treasurer Cervantes?
Thank you for moving me up.
Yep.
Last year, the Bank of New York approached the city about accepting a deed in lieu of foreclosure for the property at 116 Day Street. A petition was submitted to the City Council and approved in October. And now the deed and the final order are prepared, and so I'm here seeking the committee's recommendation for the order. A little bit of background on the property. It originally had a two-family on it. Apparently the owner walked away. The city had to demolish the building in 2015, and the majority of the taxes owed on the property are that demolition lien. It's now a vacant lot of about 1/10 of an acre.
And the value, according to the documentation, is $56,600, and that's encompassing the demolition?
It exceeds $65,000, actually.
65. So bank foreclosed on it,
Yes.
and now we're taking it back. Is there any plans in the future to maybe have this be part of a side yard sales program, or?
I think it's probably a good candidate for that program.
Thank you. Councilor Boschman?
We can't work out a deal with the bank to give us some money for taking care of their property?
I haven't inquired, so we could make that inquiry, but the property itself is only worth $2,700, so I'm not sure what they would be willing to give us.
That's the same property there was a fire on, am I right, Tom? That was the same property they had a fire on that year, a couple of years ago? No?
I don't know.
All right.
The property was abandoned by the owner.
Right.
The bank took possession of the property, for whatever reason deemed necessary to demolish it. It was demolished by the city. It's now a vacant lot valued at $2,700, but the man who was derelict in his responsibilities left the city with a bill of over $60,000, and now we have no other recourse but to take possession of the property, because that's inevitably what land court's going to make us do anyway.
Yeah, but my question, Mr. President, is this. You read in the paper different counties and throughout the United States taking the banks to court because they're not maintaining their properties. They're their properties. It isn't a previous owner. They foreclose, it becomes their property. And yes, this guy walked away from his property, but the bank foreclosed. So now it's the ownership of the bank. It isn't the ownership of him. Just because we put into a zombie state, the bank foreclosed, it's their bank's property. So I feel differently. They cause a lot of the problems that we have throughout this country. We should try to get something from them because it was their property. It wasn't this guy's property any longer. It's their property. And now they're coming to me to say, please forgive me, and we'll give you this little square piece of land and wipe out the taxes so we don't have to pay them. So I feel differently. I'm not a bank fan. I'm not corporate America fan. I'm just not a bank fan. So I'm hoping you go back to them and ask them, hey, they're willing to take it, but give us something. We had to tear your property down. So, because it made the area look blight. And we're trying to improve the area. So that's all I get to say.
I agree 100% with your sentiment on this. It's not fair. The taxpayers, by and large, get screwed in the end. But I'm sure there is established legal precedent, and there's court cases that force our hand into doing this and give the banks let the banks go scot-free on these matters. There just has to be, because I can't think I won't speak for you, Ms. Cervantes, or, I know that the Assistant City Solicitor's here. Maybe this is a topic for a future discussion, but from my experience talking to the attorneys about this, we could go to land court, we spend thousands of dollars on legal fees going after these banks or going after these property owners, and it ends up being just the land court throws us out to say, just take the property. And it's case closed, with no foresight into the fact of what was owed. It's not right, but that's how it's been established as precedent. So it's just, what we're doing is we're taking the property over and hoping to put it back on the tax rolls to someone who's actually going to be responsible this go around, because leaving it in the bank's hands will only make the property worse, and we're not going to get anything out of it. And I agree with you, that's wrong, but there's clearly established precedent that allows them to get away with doing that. And I don't think it's something we're going to solve here tonight. But I agree with your sentiment on it, 100%. Counselor Donnelly.
Well, I do agree with the sentiment. If you don't take it, you could have it sit there for 10 years before, and then, it'd have to go through all of the procedure to do all of the things to have a land court taking. So while we don't like it, you're gonna swallow the medicine, and it's the best course of action for the city. And there's probably lots and lots of court cases there that people are trying to take banks to court, but they're not getting anywhere with the banks. So best course of action, in my opinion, for the city is to just take it. Thank you.
Motion to approve 03018. Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 03018.
On the
Speaking on
motion.
the motion, Counselor Zarella was first.
First, I'd just like to agree with Councillor Donnelly on this. We could challenge it, and there's even a chance, a slim chance, that we could get somewhere on it. But it would be years and years and legal fees, and ultimately would end up, if you consider also the value of the property and the maintenance on it and whatnot, would end up losing more money than we'd get out of trying to get the balance of that 56 whatever out of the over the 227 some odd that it's worth. I just don't think that it would be an efficient move for us. I think it would feel good to beat them at this, but it won't get us anywhere.
Counselor Boishman?
On this side yard sale, if this is where the property is going to end up, can you make it very clear to the neighbors that if they do not have parking, we recommend that they really look into this piece of property at the abutters, because the city will crack down in that area if we're giving away property. I think Councilor Donnelly would agree on that. So I think we ought to really make it clear to them that they will be cracking down for off-street parking.
Counselor Zarella?
I'm on side yard sales and zoning, and yes, we do. We are both A, encouraging people to use the side yard sales for parking when necessary, and B, cracking down on insufficient parking on the zoning end of things.
Okay. Thank you.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve 30-18. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll next move to the top of the agenda,
I hope you feel better.
01818, in order that there being hereby is transferred from within the sum of $30,000 to be transferred from Assessor Personal Services, Department Head, and credited to Assessor Expenses, Contracted Services. Chief of Staff to the Mayor, Mr. Terigny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, councilors. The transfer of funds that is before you this evening is the result of the city beginning and having conversations with Regional Resource Group upon the retirement of our previous chief assessor, Ken Wilson. Working with our current clerical support, our assessor and our part-time assessor, RRG will be providing chief assessing services ranging from exemptions, abatements, revals, and appellate tax board cases, and much more. Currently, our solicitor's office is reviewing the proposed contract between the city and RRG to act as the chief assessor for the remainder of this current fiscal year, with the expectation for RRG to begin in mid-March. Also, during this time, there may be a second request for a transfer of funds or appropriation to fully fund the contract. This is a result of a contractual retirement obligations the city had with the previous chief assessor, and was not forecasted to be placed in the fiscal budget when we were setting the budget. Of the 25 communities that RRG currently serves, the city had made reference calls to surrounding communities who all spoke highly of RRG's professionalism and knowledge of the assessing field. Also, our current treasurer has several years of experience working with RRG in both in Ashburnham and in Sterling. Specifically speaking, the city of Marlborough is the largest community that RRG serves and is the most familiar to Fitchburg, with a population of 38,000 residents and a strong industrial past in the 11-member city council. In terms of next fiscal year for FY19, although the assessing is exempt from procurement, in an effort for transparency, the city will issue an RFQ for all similar companies to answer to serve as the chief assessor. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
President Kuchmarek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Trigny, correct in understanding this is only through the end of, this would be a contract only through the end of this current fiscal year, 2018?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And this would give the opportunity for the mayor and the administration to both review for the bid process for FY 2019, have the opportunity to both review the current contractor, as well as whether or not this would be a sufficient model for us moving forward. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. And that's my biggest concern of, where we'd be essentially eliminating a department head in the city and the physical presence of a department head. And, this model has worked elsewhere, and I believe that it can work here, but I think it's essential that, as we move in this direction, that we use this period, that's before us as an opportunity to evaluate if this can work for us, if it's sufficient in terms of staffing as well as resources. And then, again, if we decide to move forward to an FY19 contract, I'd ask for that same thing of, before we enter into any long-term negotiation or contracts with an organization, that we look at, maybe just a one-year provisional contract, so we can, again, evaluate and then set the long-term strategy from there. But I think as a stopgap measure, I think this is effective and will allow us to pilot something different and unique for us. And I know there's been a struggle with other communities. I think there's something like 15 or 16 open searches for chief assessor positions throughout the Commonwealth, and often seeing the same positions reposted on Mass Municipal Association. So this is my support. Thank you.
Council Boschman.
Well, Counselor, I happen to disagree with you, and I happen to disagree with you. Now, my question to you is, we got 16,000 homes. We got 40,000 people in the city of Fitchburg compared to 20,000. We have a personal touch. We have 4 3. We have a part-time, Tom, we got Chris, we got the girl, and we had Ken Wilson, who retired. What's going to happen on the evaluation part of it, when we have evaluation, and when Chris is not there and we got a line of customers, and some of these girls, the girls can't answer all the questions, are we going to tell the customers, I'm sorry, we got to wait for the part-time guy to come in here to solve our problems? And that's not, wait a minute, let me finish now, hold on. And if we're going to, and why are we picking that department, when they had no problems in that department, but other departments, they had problems, and we avoid them. We don't even farm out the work. Why? I don't want to lose, me personally, I don't believe in farm-outs. I don't believe in farm-outs. I think you're taking qualified people away from the people of Fitchburg. And these people that work there understand you and me. This guy doesn't care. He looks on a map and he says, that's it. It's a blanket case.
Counselor.
Well, every case is not a blanket.
Counselor.
What? I'm sorry if I get excited.
No, it's not about your excitement. We're going to have a local presence there. There's still going to be a assessor plus a assessor and a half present, as you pointed out, and there's going to be the 2 clerical staff. One of the women in that office is also on the assessing board.
Boy, right.
So there's still going to be a presence of 3.5 people there at all times in the office.
Not all times, Counselor. Sorry about that. They go on the road. Chris goes on the road. I've been down there when he's on the road.
Okay, but
and Tom's on the road.
Counselor, the other staff members, whether it's Tom or the other 2 individuals that are in the office at all times. Those two are in the office at all times. They are also qualified, knowledgeable of what's going on in the assessing department. They've been there for well over 15, 20 years. So I understand your concern, but we're not eradicating any local personnel within the assessor's office. They're all still going to be there. They're all still going to be there as if nothing ever changed. This is specifically to farm out the chief assessing work that the prior chief assessor was doing, primarily because we need someone online right now. And as President Kuchmarek pointed out, there are recs out there across the Commonwealth that have been unfilled for months, if not years. Very difficult position to find. So this is a stopgap measure until they see how they do and arrive at a long-term solution that will be discussed more fully at the next round of budget hearings when we have the assessor's office before us. So this is just to carry us through the end of June. Understanding that this is not going to fully privatize the office, and there's still going to be local personnel who have years of experience doing this, still present in the City Hall office.
Correct. And Counselor, the regional assessor that would be assigned to our office is actually a resident of Fitchburg as well. And to add to the reevaluation part, it was actually Mr. Wilson as well as Mr. Caputi who do most of the revals for the city. And that, without Mr. Wilson being there, that's a huge component, and that will be able to be done by RRG Services.
Is that going to be an extra cost?
No, currently, no. We're for this fiscal year, the funding that we have, the transfer of funds will fund the position, and then as I stated earlier, there may be an additional appropriation or transfer of funds towards the end of this fiscal year because of the contractual obligations we had that we could not forecast for Mr. Wilson's retirement.
So you're telling me this $30,000 is going to take care of March, April, May, and June, and on a four-hour basis, am I right or wrong? When Ken Wilson was working 8 hours a day.
So this is going to take care of March, April, mid-March, April, May, and June. That's correct. And it's just, they're providing services that may not be done inside City Hall. They still have an entire team. It's not, the regional assessor will be at City Hall, that's correct. They still have an entire team of people at their own location that's still working on the city's behalf.
Yeah, so is Chris going to be able to handle all this extra work he's going to get? And the girls going to be able to handle it?
Yes.
Oh, they are. Well, you don't know. How can you say yeah when we don't know? We never did it.
We've had discussions, and built into the contract are the assigned jobs and duties of what the city staff are expected to do and what RRGs is expected to do.
I think this is crazy, really. You're taking a good department that never had any problems,
This is
and we're tearing it
Counselor,
apart.
this is not a reflection of the department, and it's not farming out. I'd like to correct that. We're not farming out a position. We're filling a position. That's
How
what
do
we're
you figure
doing.
you're filling it? You're not filling it. You're farming it out. You took his job, he retired, and he's gone, and now you took his work and you gave it to him.
Counselor, I will remind you that, as the testimony stated, there is a reason this is taking place. They sought requisitions for a chief assessor. Like other cities and towns in the Commonwealth who can't find one, neither can we because it's a scarce position. We need someone in the interim to carry the workload until we find a permanent solution.
When did they advertise, Counselor? When did they advertise?
That is
They didn't
not
come in front of
appropriate to
council
the
and talk to
discussion
us.
before us. The discussion before us, Counselor, is do we agree as a committee to transfer $30,000 from personal services to contract services so we can have this company take on the workload while we seek a permanent solution? Because the work isn't going to stop. We still need the work to get done. And all of the personnel will still be there, will still be present. And you said earlier about you having a problem with privatizing, and that the companies we contract out may not care. I would wager to you, sir, that they do care because they want the business. And if they don't perform adequately, they're going to lose the business. So they have an incentive to do a good job, or else they're not going to have it at the end of June. That's all.
The only thing I want to say, we just opened the gate a little bit, and we're supposed to let a little bit of water in. But now we open the gate, there's going to be a hell of a lot more water coming in. Because you're telling me that you're going to come back in front of, it's going to be in the budget, and a budget for next year, because you don't have any plans to replace them. And all I want you to do is advertise it. Put it in there and advertise and see what happens.
Well,
That's all. We haven't advertised.
right now, we're for this fiscal year is what this line item is about, Counselor.
But you also talked about next year,
I
in
did.
2019.
Yeah, but after speaking with Counselor Kushmerek, he had a set of standards that you would like to see that are met prior to us going out to RFQ or us hiring a company that answers the RFQ.
Go ahead. I'm starting to get mad, so forget it. Go ahead, pass. I pass for now.
Counselor Zarella.
I'd just like to sort of summarize what I'm hearing here to make sure that we're all on the same page and that I'm on the right page. So, we're going to this contract service because of an unanticipated vacancy in the department. That's why we're doing it for this department and not any other one, correct?
Yes, sir.
And this is only to cover until we have an opportunity to figure out our next move. There will be a local person in the position in the office, correct?
Correct.
And all current employees are staying on.
Absolutely.
So basically, we're trying to keep the department up and running for the next 3 months, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And at that time, there will be an opportunity for the council to consider whatever is proposed for the next step.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Walsh.
Councilor Zarella pretty much said what I was going to say, but I just wanted to clarify that at the end of this fiscal year, if we're not happy with their services, we don't have to enter into another contract with them
Yes,
for
ma'am.
the following year.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Counselor Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am concerned with the brain drain in Fitchburg. I can only go back 40 years. I know a lot of people are tired of hearing the history, but I'm going to keep it up. 40 years, there's always been someone that, from the city of Fitchburg, that was the chief assessor. And it's a tragedy that we can't get somebody that's qualified that actually lives in the city. So when you mention a street or a location or a number, they can quickly recognize what the individual's speaking about. I know anybody can go on a computer and look at a map, but there's a big difference between the personal service that we've had for all these years. So I'm opposed to putting it out. I might agree with doing it for temporary, but I really think we should have a permanent person or a couple of permanent people there that are qualified and evaluated on a regular basis. Thank you.
I have two more counselors that want to speak. Before I get to them, I just wanted to ask, where did the city of Fitchburg put this position out for, did we solicit applications?
To fill that, no, sir.
No. What was the reason for not doing that?
We had discussions with other communities that are using RRG, and for the short time period of the remainder of the fiscal year, we decided to do the same.
So there's no legal requirement that they have to put it out. You may want them to put it out, but they didn't choose to do that. They chose to go with a reputable firm that other communities in Massachusetts have contracted out. You said that a local individual working for this company who lives in Fitchburg will be in this office.
Yes, sir.
So it's not as if someone who's going to be taking over, at least temporarily, has no idea about the city that they're working in. They live here. So I don't want it to be lost that we're losing that local touch. So this to me is a decision by the mayor's office to decide whether they want to have this be a full-time position for right now temporarily, or have someone contracted out temporarily, and that's the decision they made. So I think it's better to talk about the long-term plans of this office's operations when we have budget hearings in May and June. That is when we can have whatever battle counselors want to have about this specific subject. But for right now, we need a short-term solution. I want to remind everybody historically, we had a chief assessor who was in that office for over 2 decades. He retired. His, if you will, second in command became the chief assessor. And surprisingly retired, or unexpectedly retired. So we've gone through 2 chief assessors with many years of experience in the span of 2 or 3 years. So, you know, this was unexpected. This was not talked about in the last budget hearing, which is why it was said earlier that we might have to make another appropriation to cover the retirees' expenses for buyback and whatnot, because we didn't know he was going to retire abruptly like this. So this is a short-term solution to carry us through the end of the fiscal year, and there is a potential that they may stay on after that, and there's a potential they may not. But that is a discussion we need to have 3 months from now. Because right now, as was communicated, there are multiple cities in this state that cannot find this position. We were fortunate to have 2 men, 2 individuals who had a lot of experience, back-to-back, both retiring within 2 years of each other. No one foresaw this. So to me, as I see the overall landscape, this makes sense operationally in the short term until we can take a breath and see how it works out. And that's my position on it. And I, you know, as to the loss of the local touch, we're not losing a local touch. Maybe we're not, I'm not saying you can't replace the myriad of experience that these other gentlemen had, but it's not like we're bringing someone in from Saugus. You know, it's someone who lives in this city who's going to be doing it. And all other personnel are going to stay put. Councilor Zarella.
I did just want to reiterate that from what I've heard, it sounds like we made the decision to go out rather than to put out the position because there are so many communities that are already seeking this position and failing to find it. So we could put the position out and do without anyone in the position for a few months while we wait and see the no applications rolling in, or we can put a stopgap measure in place, which then gives us leeway to take our time trying to find someone.
President Kuchmarek.
I was going to say that in a different way, which is one way or another, this position is going to remain vacant. You know, if we decided to move forward with a search, it would be vacant for probably at least 3 months. So we have the opportunity of getting someone in on the ground in the next 2 weeks to continue the work through the end of the fiscal year. We get to pilot something and test something. And as we do with every department, we have the opportunity to interface and interact with the mayor's office, the administration, and the various departments. And I would say, you know, within a couple of weeks of these contracted services starting, go to the assessor's office as you would a regular concerned citizen. Talk to them. See, have things changed? At the end of the day, though, it's the mayor's responsibility to run the city and to put the appropriate personnel in place to make the city successful and to run them. It's our job, you know, to pass ordinances and to pass orders and set the budget. So we'll have that opportunity come budget season. If we don't like the model, then, you know, councilors could propose a cut to contracted services. But this is an opportunity for us to try something new without any long-term ramifications for the city. I'd encourage us to do that.
Councilor Squalia.
Putting out to bid, right, putting a request for qualifications, do we not have to do that for this position at this moment because it's a temporary emergency measure?
No, it's an exemption by our procurement officer looked into it, and it is an exemption from procurement. Assessing services.
Assessing services in general is, so we don't have to put a request for qualifications out for FY19 if we choose not to?
If we choose not to.
But we
correct.
could choose to put it out to bid?
Yes. Yes,
But we might consider preference to ROG, is
RRG.
RRG?
And if we do, the mayor's already dictated he'd like to put it out to bid for FY19 if we choose to go that route.
Motion to approve 01818.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 01818. Any questions or comments on the motion from committee members? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Counselor,
Did you vote yes or no,
Yeah, I
Counsel?
voted yes, this for the 30 days, the 3 months.
It's unanimous.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add, I would like to, I know on behalf of the mayor and myself, thank Ken Wilson for, I know we didn't really quite get that opportunity publicly to thank him for his 20-plus years of service, and I'm hoping he's enjoying his retirement life. I know we're all jealous. And also, our staff at the assessor's office have been very, very helpful and great to the public during this process. So just wanted to mention that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for bringing that up. Next, we'll move on to 2818, in order that the City Council, by majority vote pursuant to General Law, Chapter 4, Section 4, adopt the provisions of General Law, Chapter 64N, Section 3, to impose a local sales tax on the sale or transfer of marijuana or marijuana products by a marijuana retailer operating within the city or town to anyone other than a marijuana establishment at the rate of up to 3% of the total sales perceived by the marijuana retailer as a consideration for the sale of marijuana or marijuana products, the rate to be specified by city ordinance. Assistant City Solicitor Tree.
Good evening. I am here just to introduce this proposed order. As we all know, recreational marijuana will be allowed to be sold in the coming months. The first possible license grant will be on June the 1st of 2018, and those will be for applicants which have been able to submit an early application on April the 1st of 2018 and have successfully navigated the entire system by that point in time. By accepting this order, or really recommending the acceptance of this order, you would be permitting the city to accept the statute and thereby permit the city to set a tax rate. This order itself does not specifically set the tax rate. The tax rate by statute may be up to 3%. That is the local component of the entire tax. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
President Kuchmarek.
Attorney Tree, would I be correct in understanding this is simply adopting Massachusetts general law so that our city code and ordinances reflect that?
That is correct. There is, I will note, a pending ordinance that sets the rate at 3%, but that certainly has not yet been voted on.
And procedurally speaking, this would need to be done first before we could then take action on the other. So this is simply, Mr. Chair, a procedural vote that allows us to then move forward with subsequent discussion and deliberation. So that said, I'd make a motion to approve 02818.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 02818. Speaking on that motion, Attorney Tree, we could adopt this and then at a future meeting put 0%, correct?
That's correct.
Right. So this has no forbearing on a future rate. That's for a separate discussion, as you pointed out.
That's correct. If you don't mind, I would like to also highlight something for members of this committee. In order to adopt a local sales tax rate, the adoption must be finally enrolled 30 days before the first day of the next quarter that it would apply to. So for instance, if before April the 1st, the ordinance adopting a tax rate is enrolled, the first date it could apply would be July the 1st. So I just want to highlight that for you, that there will be some time delay if and when a tax is enacted. There is a possibility under our current regime that the month of June 2018, if there is a licensed retailer, will be a tax-free marijuana month in Fitchburg. So that is something to take into consideration when you're considering the ordinance in another form.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded to approve 02818. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Finally, we'll move on to 02918, in order that the Honorable Mayor Stephen D. Natale is authorized on behalf of the City of Fitchburg to facilitate and execute the attached community host benefit agreement with Atlantic Medical Partners located at 774 Crawford Street, Fitchburg, Mass.
Make a motion that we hold this petition?
Do I have a second to hold? We do
Can I
not-
explain why I'm making this motion?
Only if someone seconds the motion.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded to hold 2918, speaking on the motion, Counsel Boishman.
Speaking on the motion. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to stop them. As I was talking to the city solicitor here, I'm not trying to stop them from opening up their plant on 774 Crawford Street, Airport Road. But what I don't want is I don't believe that we, as a council, as a full council, voted for dispensaries in these areas that are opening up. We did not vote for them. We voted for the rights for them to open up a medical marijuana and grow it, but not sell it. And when I talked to Vinnie Thursday or 2 days ago, I gave him my suggestions of why I was against it, and he said, well, hold it until the zoning comes in to see where the zoning's gonna land on the disbursement of selling the medical marijuana or the recreational marijuana, that too. So this is why I'm asked, because according to their permit, and the planning board gave them the rights to grow it and sell it. Am I right or wrong?
So we were trying to discuss this just outside, and my recollection is at the last planning board meeting, this particular facility had done its preliminary presentation to the planning board, which means that no special permit has yet been granted to this company.
So I'm asking that we hold it for the time being until we have a zoning in place, number one, because I don't believe that you should be allowed to grow it and sell it from the same place. If you grow it, then bring it over here and sell it. Why have it there? Anwell Shoe, when they were in business, manufactured shoes. They didn't open up a store downstairs. They sold it to their product, to their customers, and they didn't have it. Why not do it here? We're trying to fix up the city, so why not? You can grow it there. You want to sell it down on Main Street? Fix up Main Street, fix up a building and sell it on Main Street. That's all I'm saying.
So I just, we had a brief discussion before
Yeah.
this meeting started, and just for your future review, in the proposed zoning ordinance, there's a section 181.6545, which states that a marijuana retailer can only be co-located with another type of marijuana establishment, or in fact, any other use, if it's separated by full walls. I don't know whether or not that completely addresses your concern, because it might be in the same location, but separated by a full wall. So, just so you review. Okay?
So to address Counsel Boishman's concern, we have an ordinance in place already zoning medical marijuana,
Correct.
and we have one that's coming before us to address retail marijuana, retail sale marijuana, correct?
Correct.
Is this host agreement impacted by whatever we decide on the ordinance? Do they go hand in hand is what I'm asking?
They do. So this particular host agreement, and this is a policy shift, I will say. We have, prior to getting at least some small guidance from the CCC on what recreational marijuana was going to look like, looked at this as, we'll look at this as a medical, and if you want to have a recreational later, we'll do it with a separate host agreement.
So this host agreement, Attorney Tree, is just for the medical?
No.
No, it's for
No,
both?
this would also cover recreational if the
Okay.
facility went to recreational. The reason behind that shift in policy is because coming towards the end of this year, DPH will be shifting supervision of any marijuana manufacturing or cultivation or distribution to the CCC. It's all going to be in one big place. And the treatment of medical and recreational, except for, as far as I can see, social consumption, is not going to be that different from one to the other. So therefore, the reason for having to renegotiate separate host agreements for a facility which may have a medical portion of its functions and then may convert to recreational does not seem to be an appropriate expenditure of our time, particularly where we are now limited by statute in what we can charge for a host fee to 3%. So this agreement would apply to both recreational if that did come into play in the future, and I do anticipate it would, it does seem to be the way that almost all of our manufacturers are going. It would still apply.
So, from what you made for a last comment, there are medical manufacturing facilities we've already agreed have host agreements with that we've accepted as a council and as a city that may in the future have a retail component.
That is correct. Other than this agreement, though, those other agreements do not encompass recreational functions.
So we would have to revisit that with them if they so chose, whereas this one is the first where we're actually encompassing both.
That's correct.
Okay. President Kuchmarek.
Assistant Solicitor Tree, am I correct in understanding the host agreement, or the community host agreement isn't the single governing document that allows them to be in our city? Am I correct? They still have to, by city code, go through every other requirement that's been laid out through zoning and planning and public health. Is that correct?
That's correct, and obviously CCC. But it's a special permit under the proposed zoning ordinances. So they would have to have both the host agreement and the special permit and a site plan review. There is a proposed provision regarding experienced operators, so someone who has already been in operation as a medical establishment prior to the passage of the zoning ordinance, which would, and received a special permit, that would allow them to go through only site plan review.
And did I understand you said correctly the maximum or the cap on the host agreement fee is at 3%, and this would meet that 3% threshold?
Yes.
Is that the mandated amount that it be 3%, or do we negotiate to the cap successfully with this organization?
The statute states that the host fee has to be related to the impact that the facility has on the community, but can be no more than 3%. Okay, and that I know it's similar to the tax, but it's a separate issue. The tax, which we discussed just a moment ago, is applicable only to retail sales, so recreational only, and only retail sales, not wholesales. The host fee is applicable to all facilities, medical or recreational, and it applies to the gross sales price. And one of the things that we have tried very hard is to measure the appropriate gross sales price depending on what kind of sale we're talking about, whether it's a retail, whether it's a wholesale to another third-party retailer, or whether it's a wholesale to another dispensary that is owned by the same company. So in other words, we don't want it to be grown here and then wholesale sold to another facility down on the Cape, and only get a small fraction of the price. In that case, we look at what is the end price, and that's how we're going to measure the percentage. As to the percentages that are actually in this agreement, they vary. The retails are 3%, and the wholesales are 1%. And in retails sales, what I've looked at is anything that originates in Fitchburg and ends up with a consumer. So if there is a delivery from this facility to somebody who lives in Athol, then we get 3% of that. The other thing to note is that there is a community relations board to which this company has proposed making a contribution annually of $50,000.
I think we as a city have done very well to be able to negotiate to the absolute ceiling with all of these organizations, and the fact that we've been able to successfully do so once again and come to an agreement, I think is advantageous to the city. As we've discussed already, Atlantic Medical Partners is going to have to go through every prerequisite that's already been determined, and they won't be able to begin operations until that has occurred. So I see no reason in holding this, because we've already set the mechanisms and the appropriate controls in place. This is agreeing that should they meet all of those, that we agree to allow them to operate in our community and for them to, and for the amounts that they're willing to pay, which in this case is the very max that we would be able to get. So in that case, in this instance, I think it's appropriate for us to move forward in adopting this order, not holding it. Thank you.
Just to make sure that I did state that correctly, because I went on to a separate point, 3% is for the retail sales, 1% is for cultivation.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that doesn't include what we're going to talk about in the future on top of that.
On the taxation, yes.
Okay. Counselor Zarella?
Two quick questions. First, just to clarify, the full wall separation requirement, does that also apply between retail and medical dispensary?
It
Or would
is-
those be at the same counter?
It is any other use.
Okay.
And a medical retailer is a different use than, a medical dispensary is a different use than a recreational retailer.
Okay, that's what I thought. Just wanted to make sure. And secondly, in reference to Councillor Boschman's motion, I don't have the page in front of me right now, but am I correct in recalling that the agreement is expressly conditional on, all necessary approvals and zoning regulations of the council?
Yes, and let me say that the zoning regulations and the host agreements are mutually interdependent. Excuse me.
So
Yeah. So-
basically, if we were to approve this tonight and then decide differently on the zoning so that the proposed agreement is not actually legal under the zoning that we end up adopting, then the zoning would still control and the agreement would have to be renegotiated, correct?
Correct. The regulatory authority of the city is retained. Despite this agreement, the city does not give that up in any way. In order to have a special permit, you must have a host agreement. In order for a host agreement to allow you to function, you must have a special permit.
So in effect, approving now rather than holding would not actually harm our ability to regulate this in any way.
So I guess that if there was some other question regarding the appropriateness of the facility, the appropriateness of this particular company, it would be almost kind of a backdoor way of regulating. If this was a company that wanted to locate in an appropriate district, but for some reason the council didn't want them to locate there, withholding a host agreement may be a way of doing so. But the other way of doing so is going to the planning board, because the planning board has a lot of discretion in its siting. And talking to them about this is an appropriate site for the facility, or this is not the appropriate way for this facility to function, that is another option. So, again, this host agreement not being approved will prevent a special permit being issued, okay? Regardless of the issuance of any, of the approval of any host agreement, no one may get a license before June 1st. Without a host agreement, no applicant to the CCC will have a completed application. That's another thing.
So this just allows them to move forward with the process so that if we decide to permit it through zoning and whatnot, there won't be any further delays then while we
That's
take care of
correct.
the host agreement.
And they can't get a special permit unless the zoning ordinances are,
Unless the zoning ordinance permits the use in the
Right.
district that they want to locate in.
so they're all interconnected in some fashion.
They are.
One doesn't act independently of the other. Counselor Boschman?
Counselor, we voted on to allow medical marijuana to be grown. We never set the rules for dispensing. Never once did we talk about it at a full council or as a city. We were always told, and I'll repeat, told, that we were not going to allow dispensing in the city. I'm not against it, don't get me wrong when I talk. We were always told we weren't gonna allow that they could sell it in Boot-Bahoo over there, but they weren't gonna sell it over here. We were just gonna let them grow it and transport it out. Now, you're talking about a host agreement. Okay, let's talk about the host agreement. We had one company that came in front of this city. They didn't give us a host agreement, so what are we gonna say to them? You can't do it? Because they didn't have to by law. They told us they were opening it up, and they didn't have a host agreement, because we were too late. So if they want to sell their product, how can you stop them?
So if that, I believe that's Garden Remedies, is that the
I don't know the names. I can only tell you the building. It was the former Asher Pants, Mohawk Cable and Wire, whatever you want, Mohawk Wire, that place.
Yeah, so that was, of course, before my time, or the current solicitor's time, or the current administration's time. And I am not familiar with what was told to you, but I certainly accept that it was true. That being said, that's not what our zoning ordinances say. Our zoning ordinances permit dispensaries. We have a company in place that does not have a host agreement because it preceded, I think, a lot of thought, and I think preceded the zoning ordinances. They were not put in place for medical marijuana prior to the company opening. Again, before our time. That being said, a medical facility which wants to become a recreational marijuana facility is still going to have to enter into a host agreement. It's a requirement under the statute. The fact that they are there now will prevent us from prohibiting them from becoming a recreational facility simply on the basis of zoning. But in order to have a completed application with the CCC, they must have a host agreement. They must have a host agreement with the city. They are not a pre-existing use because there was no pre-existing use of recreational marijuana manufacturing or dispensing at the time that they opened. So I would say that to you about that particular agreement, and it is, I agree, unfortunate that that facility came into place prior to us having a host agreement with them.
You want to, I don't know, I went down there and looked, and you're gonna have, where I understand, you get that place that wants it, you get the former, I call it Asher's, the former Asher, you may have another one, the old Pocket Kramer, you might, and then you get the one up there in West Fitchburg. You got 4 locations.
Yeah.
You got 3 of them right on Airport Road. 3 on Airport Road.
And that is in part because we have a very limited area where any marijuana establishment may locate.
We haven't set the zoning on that yet.
We've set the zoning for medical.
Medical, but not recreational.
No, but the proposed ordinance mirrors the medical zoning. So the proposal, and certainly it will be discussed and finalized, it may be something different than it is right now, but the proposal is to limit to the same areas where medical is. There is one exception, it would be, there's a function called independent testing facility, so basically like a lab, and I think that might have a more expansive location district than simply the medical, which is the overlay district and the industrial and light industrial, I believe.
I don't know. I just feel that, I think we're limiting our scope.
So we'll move to question,
I just think
Mr.
we're
Chair.
limiting it, huh?
Do we have any retail marijuana establishments right now operating in the city?
Not that are known to me or to anyone in my office.
Well, I'm going with the
I
slant
will
of
take that
questioning.
back. I can't speak for the solicitor.
Officially, legally, officially, do we have any recreational retail operations going on other than medical marijuana manufacturing?
No. And I do know that the club that opened recently in Worcester is concerned, but to my knowledge, we have none.
Okay, so and we have one dispensary for the medical portion of the business, to distribute the medical. So we've already zoned everything from medical marijuana manufacturing and dispensing. The recreational retail sales and dispensing, selling, we have not zoned yet. That's going to be before us at a future date. I wanted to just make it clear to the public, we have no operations legally or officially operating because we don't have those zoning ordinances in place, and they can't operate legally or officially until we establish those zoning ordinances. This host agreement, to me, based on the testimony provided, is they need this agreement in place in order to move forward as a medical and recreational sale establishment. And in order to have that agreement in place, they have to get the special permits through the planning board and abide by our zoning regulations. The planning board's not going to grant a special permit without any ordinances in place. So just because we're accepting a host agreement that has recreational use in the document doesn't give them license next week to open up a recreational store without the proper zoning or the proper special permits. So we're going to be taking up the zoning aspect of the dispensing of recreational and retail sales at a later date, but this company just can't go and open an establishment until that ordinance is in place and until the planning board establishes that special permit for them, which would require us to have the zoning in place. So
why don't
there's
we
there's nothing happening under the radar that's going to slip by us. This is just one piece of a major process that is required for it to move forward.
And I understand what you're saying, Counsel, and I understand what the council is saying to me here, too. But when I talked to the city solicitor, he said he agrees with what I say. He said, why don't we just wait until they put the zoning in to see what happens? There's no difference. Let me explain something. I work for a government industry, GE. Over here, they manufacture stuff for the government, the U.S. government, and over here was for industrial. There was no difference from the boats. There was a boat here and a boat here. And it was the same. So because they got medical marijuana, this company can sell, they'll be able to sell recreational in there. And because we don't have a zoning, we got medical, we got medical, we don't have the zoning for recreational. And who says we may want 5 of them, or the 4 we have max, down there on Airport Road? Don't those people have a right to say something down there too?
Counselor,
Maybe we want down there.
That is what we're going to talk about at a future meeting.
Yeah, I know, but let's just hold on to it. You're missing my point. There's no rush to rush this. This guy's not going to start growing it tomorrow morning.
I don't see it as rushing. I will ask a very simple, if we accept this agreement, and then in a couple of weeks, a month, we establish a zoning ordinance that isn't in line with the medical side, does that make this agreement null and void?
This agreement, mind if I take a moment? I just
Sure.
want to check my memory to make sure that what I'm about to say is true. Okay.
Where I'm going with this is it's just establishing guidelines and an agreement between the city and the company when and if they open a business of that kind, irrespective of where it would be located, correct? So,
Yes. So
short of us banning it, the agreement's the agreement, no matter where they operate.
The thing I did want to look at, because there was some discussion on this about whether this would apply to any facility that was located in the city, but I believe as written, it applies only to the 7074 Crawford Street. So yes, regardless though, if this applied to my old office at 625 Main Street, and the zoning did not permit it, it would not be allowed to go in.
So it's contingent on it operating at 774 Crawford Street. If it doesn't operate at Crawford Street, then this agreement is invalid?
Believe so.
And I guess what I'm doing, my position is, we haven't talked about the ordinances yet for the zoning on recreational use, but at the very least, I wouldn't understand why we wouldn't not allow it to be at the same location as where the manufacturing is. I mean, do we want to put it near schools and on Main Street, or do we want to put it right next to where the business is? So it's, again, different subject, different conversation. I mean, it's up to the committee how you want to proceed. If you want to hold it, we have a motion on the floor that's been seconded to hold this in committee. I will, and President Kuchmarek asked that it be moved, so I am going to take a vote on the motion to hold. Motion to hold 2918. All those in favor of holding, Raise your hand. All those opposed of holding? The motion does not carry 4-1.
Motion to approve.
Counselor,
I wanted to speak before
Counselor
there was a
Donnelly?
motion.
Yep, go ahead.
I just want to go on a record as supporting this.
Counselor, because you're not on the committee, by open meeting law, you can't state a position on something that you're not on the committee for. You can ask questions, but you can't state your position because you're not on the committee.
I can't state my position.
Correct.
Trying to word,
I try to quarterback that as best I can. even though I
can't
can't,
go on a
even though
record
for the life of me, I'll
as-
never
I
understand that
I
law.
can't
But
go on a record as supporting business in the city.
you can't voice support in committee for a matter before the agenda or against it because you're not a committee member. per the
Maybe I
OML.
can ask the counselor why he would object. We could someone could open a strip club in a zoning. Is industrial zone down there? That's the counselor, I'm addressing it to the counselor.
Okay.
Why he would object to recreational marijuana being sold in an industrial zone. So if you're talking about sins, which would be the lesser of the two, and does it make a difference in the industrial zone?
Motion to approve 02918.
Second.
Motion and seconded to approve 02918. Any, speaking on the motion, any committee members? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? One in opposition. Passes 4-1.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.